you couldn't have that speech. That conversation could not have happened. Technology has made incredible advances in the past 100 years. Oftentimes we take that for granted. Today I want to go over the changes that we've made in technology the past few hundred years. So we'll start out with flying. Before 1900, the only ways that we had of flying were using balloons or gliders. Inventors used these to simulate flying, although they didn't have any control, they weren't self-powered. But then, the pioneer era happened. The Wright brothers flew their first controlled flight December 17th, 1903. And since then, the field has completely changed. A lot of things happened in the pioneer era. Things really started to pick up in World War I. World War I saw the invention of biplanes that were made of wood and fabric. They were often used in reconnaissance missions in World War I. The period in between World War I and World War II, known as the Golden Era, saw great advancements in aviation technology. Planes went from being made of wood and fabric to being made of aluminum, and they were machines. During World War II, we started mass producing planes and using them in war more frequently. The Cold War era saw yet even more advances in aviation. We broke the speed of sound. We saw the greatest advancement for all of us. Commercial aviation took off. What used to take a year or several months flying from China to New York, getting from China to New York, can now be done in a day. The current era, since 1991, we've seen advances in unmanned flight technology. Haven't broken a lot of records, haven't seen a lot of advancement in that way. But we'll continue to go and advance in aviation. Anything else strike you about my conversation with Mike? I mentioned websites and emails, right? Technology that used to not exist. Computers have been around longer than you might think, though. Before 1900, we had manual adding machines. They used those in ancient China. We also had the use of punch card analyzers to figure out some complex equations. 1900 to 1950, we saw a huge leap. We went from nothing, basically, to having machines that would run with vacuum tubes and could do great calculations. We also saw the field expand size-wise. Computers were the size of houses. They were incredibly large. In the 1950s, we had even more technological boosts. Today you can still see some of those. We had the invention of the magnetic hard drive, the invention of printers, and the first high-level programming languages came onto the market in the 1950s. The 1960s, floppy disk was invented. My personal favorite, the first video game was written. In the 1970s, we saw the growth of companies like Microsoft and Apple. They came onto the scene as huge software companies. We saw the expansion of networking in computers, and CDs were invented. The 1980s brought about the first graphical operating systems. These are known as Windows and Apple OS. You see these today and used all the time, but we didn't have those until the 1980s. The World Wide Web was created as a way of getting around the internet, actually being able to retrieve information easily. First video game systems were also invented in the 80s. I still have my Nintendo and play it on occasion. Since 1990, we've basically only advanced the size of our hardware. It's gotten a lot smaller and a lot faster. Our software has gotten a lot more robust and faster. These changes have brought about significant impact. Anything else about my conversation with Mike strike you that you couldn't do? He's on a cell phone. That's right. Communications.
Wow.
In the early 1800s, we used flagging systems, and in the 1800s, the telegraphs were invented. In the late 1800s, Alexander Graham Bell made his first communication across the wire. It sparked the invention of telephones and the creation of companies like AT&T. From 1920 to 1969, we went from rotary phones to touch-tone phones. From 1970 to the present, cell phones have been invented. We use text messaging now to communicate quickly. We made great advances in the last 100 years. Things that could not have been done 100 years ago, we do every day. To me, this change in technology can only be described in one way. Simply amazing. Thank you, man.